Environment and behavior. So what Appleyard drew and connected was issues in the environment that were encouraging kinds of behaviors and discouraging other kinds of behaviors that were desirable in the city. Now what's interesting is, I don't know the traffic count on Fayetteville Street. He didn't have an option that said no cars. He just said light traffic. Right. The truth about Fayetteville Street is that the developers saw more risk in building downtown housing than suburban housing in the 1960s. If they had committed to denser housing on Fayetteville Street, we would still have a mall today. That's true for Boulder, that's true for Charlottesville, and the other examples that worked extremely well is wasn't as risky. But if you could make twice as much money for half the cost by building in a green field, in a farm field in the 1960s versus rehabbing an historic building, well, it's not much money. But that describes that pattern.
Yeah, can I just...
Please do.
I used to work downtown when it was the mall, and I used to have to go to the courthouse for different things. And I think it's also the proximity of the courthouse down there, that the mall, it just dominated the atmosphere of what was going on there. You know, and that there was, you know, so there was almost like this treadmill of people going in and people coming out pretty unhappy, you know, pouring out of the mall because of what they've had to deal with in court. You know, they're up for charges or something, and then you've got the bond place there, and then watching when the ABC studios went in, and then it just sort of fed that whole kind of loop, you know. So when on the website, on the ABC website, they print the faces of everybody that was in court that day, you know, that's been charged. And so I feel like now, while I prefer a mall, the fact that it's more open, it feels like there's potential for, you know, that axis that goes down, you walk down and suddenly, oh, there's the court. So now I feel like it's a bit more, you know, democratic, you know. So anyway, that was just my observation, you know, at the time.
Fair to say. Fair observation.
So these are all descriptive strategies. These are the observation-based ones. We're going to wrap it up with a predictive one, just as an example. And I will say that the observational ones are moving into new territory. So, for example, they do have data now that talks about communities that have more street trees have more social capital. They're aligned, which means neighbors work together, have more relationships, sort of irrespective of race, class, ethnicity, gender, all of that stuff. More trees, more social capital. And hospitals, you recover up to 30% faster if you have a view to nature. Right? Alzheimer's patients, there's no cure for Alzheimer's, but the symptoms of Alzheimer's, memory loss, some of the things like the anxiety of wandering, which my grandmother, before she passed away, had Alzheimer's, and she just kind of wander off sometimes. By providing places in care facilities for people to wander in their garden, and have people's hands connected to the ground, it slows the decay of their mental functions, intellectual functions. In terms of ADHD, if kids can get physical and visual access to nature 15 minutes per day in class, it greatly reduces their anxiety, increases their ability to focus and to concentrate on problems. So the medical profession, in a lot of ways, is leading because they're seeing the landscape as a preventative form of medicine. So instead of dealing with a crisis when you have physical issues or mental issues and doing triage and trying to treat people, they're starting to see the landscape as preventative medicine, an alternative, in many ways a cheaper alternative to medication, to physical therapy, to other things. So people are positioning the behavioral research in that manner. How can the landscape be a better health provider than hospitals and form of medication? And miracle berries count too. So being in Ghana, there's lots of evidence in other cultures about that as well. We'll end with this guy, and we'll bring him up again when we get to the urbanism section of the class. This is Bill Hill here. He's a British scholar. When are they voting about Scotland, by the way? Does anybody know?
Today.
Is that today?
Today.
Yeah, but you won't hear until tomorrow.
And it's 9 p.m. tonight.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't know what I'm talking about. They're voting whether or not Scotland is going to stay in the United Kingdom or not. Today, so.
Well, they do the flag. Oh, Brad Britain.
Steve British, right? All right, so he writes this very influential book called The Social Logic of Space. The Social Logic of Space. And what he's trying to find is whether or not there are patterns, somewhat universal patterns, in how we establish human settlements, that if we pay attention to those patterns, we can predict human behavior based on the pattern alone. So, just think about the time when he's cooking up this theory. This is when environmentalists, Ian McCarty, and many others are arguing that we just don't know enough about the world around us. We need to become more complex and more nuanced in how we analyze places. We need to talk to people. We need to visit places. We need to do the deep analysis, the beginnings of geospatial analysis, that kind of thing. He was on the opposite end. He was like, no, you don't. You just need to know the pattern, particularly with human settlement, because those rules haven't changed. We think they have, but they haven't changed. How we build and what we know is livable and sustainable now is not much different than it was 1,000 years ago. So he's studying and he's studying and he's studying. So he comes up with this idea called space syntax. And this is the predictor. You're not going to believe me when I tell you this. I'll tell you this. And then you can watch the video and be confused. With 70% accuracy, using this methodology, he can predict where the vibrant, active places are in cities, where the declining, ruined places are in cities, where there's high poverty, where there's high wealth, where places are growing, where places are shrinking, just by analyzing the street map. Then he goes to the place and deals with the other 30% to figure out, talking to people, looking at the data, that sort of thing. These look like street maps, they're called axial maps. Axial maps. He's looking at two different things, and he'll explain it in his own way. This is one of these predictive assumptions. One is it highlights segments of streets that connect long destinations. So, for example, streets that connect two communities. Continuous, right? Looking at a continuous line, somewhat straight. Puts a rank order on that. Then goes into communities and starts to count the numbers of street intersections. So the first one are these big regional connections, right? Connecting big places. The next one, once you get into communities, counting all the internal connections, all the intersections. If you're high on both, you're a winner. If you're low on this, meaning you're not on a big connected route to a big regional place, and you don't have many internal connections in your neighborhood, you're probably a loser. He says it more elegantly. I'll give you an example that's local. So Purva Baran, who's on landscape architecture faculty, but also teaches in the College of Natural Resources, is an expert in space syntax. Uses it all the time. All right, so this is Southern Village in Chapel Hill. Right next door is a suburban community. Looking at two different things, they used space syntax to analyze these two adjacent communities. The two questions they were looking at are people who walk for utility, trying to predict that. Meaning I'm walking to a grocery store, I'm walking to school, or I'm walking to some form of transportation that takes me to something that I need. Right? Versus someone who walks for leisure. Now, knock on this study is like, you don't need to do space syntax to figure that out. Look at a grocery store right in the Southern Village. What the hell are you talking about? That's the critical part. Right? But on the back end part, without knowing that, right? So part analysis was not land use. Part analysis was not a lot of these other factors that we're aware of. It's literally just the axial map measuring the connections, both regional and local. And so what they did is they ran the analysis, but they also gave people pedometers, the machines that really measure how much you're walking every day, made them keep a daily log and a diary of where they were going, did a big survey at the end about where they were going, what they preferred. But those were like secondary and tertiary forms of study. The primary one was this axial map. Well, the grocery store in Sunken Village is right there. But the idea is this axial map, this line, the thickness of this line represents their highest, what they call global integration. These are the linkages that get you to the world outside. In this case, this was the highest number of internal connections. So without even knowing where it is, just looking at the two maps, that one for utility, that one for leisure too. It turns out that after they interviewed people and talked to people, more people use this for leisure, right? So walking on these streets, because they were disconnected, it brought the traffic level down and they felt safer, to do it even when there were no sidewalks or any of that infrastructure. So the model was inaccurate in terms of talking about leisure walking. I'm just walking to clear my head or that sort of thing. It was accurate in dealing with the utility of it. But that's not a joke. They've done this all over the world. They've done Jeddah is really the example that they really used. In here you can start to see the remnants of the medieval grid of particular cities. These sort of streets that aren't, they're connected and networked, but they're not gridded. And areas that were built after the post-war. And it turns out that these areas are still the centers of economic activity and are the areas that are most vibrant and are the areas that are most connected, right? Just looking at the grid. So where it's moving with neuroscience and with geospatial mapping and with predictive tools like space syntax, and it's a debate right now. Do we know enough or we don't need to be asking these questions anymore? What's utility?